I was late to school on the morning of the trip, not an uncommon occurrence back then. We lived a couple of miles outside of the village and I had to get the less than reliable school bus in, rather than walk like everyone else. That morning it struggled with a hill, and had come close to breaking down. I wouldn't have minded if it weren't for the fact that we had to pair up and all of my friends had done so already. I sighed and resigned myself to having to go around with Dave Lodge all day. Dave was one of those kids who would never fit in, through no fault of his own. When he was 7, his dad died in a car crash on the motorway, leaving his mum, a slight, nervous-looking woman, to look after him. I have no excuse for the way we acted towards him, save that we were kids. We weren't exactly mean to him, but, well, we weren't accustomed to grief, or how to handle it, in either ourselves or in others. In our defence, the staff weren't great at communicating to us about the situation. Dave's dad died over the Christmas holiday. When it took Dave until the 3rd week of January to come back, we all basically thought he had an extra long holiday that the rest of us hadn't. We noticed differences in his behaviour, of course. He no longer joined in on the jumpers for goalposts games of football on our school's scrappy half-acre pitch. He seemed to gaze, quiet and absent-minded, out of the window at the circling birds and passing cars on the A4010. At lunch, he'd have quiet conversations with teachers, while outside the door we strained to listen in. We simply didn't know what was going on. We couldn't have recognised the signs. We were just kids. By the time our teacher, Miss Aldis, a usually perky young redhead, only a few years out of university, opened up to us about the accident, it was too late. We'd all waved goodbye to the popular, outgoing Dave we knew long ago. He was forever marked as different, and as we all know, to be different is to be lonely. Although about 4 years had passed since Dave's return to school and the morning of the field trip, little had changed. He was hardly a disruptive influence, but worked very little in lessons and rarely contributed to class discussions. As a result, he fell behind, and no one was surprised when we learned he wouldn't be taking the usual final exams. Instead, he'd be going to Wybridge Comprehensive Secondary School. He sometimes joined in playing games, but was always the last to be picked for anyone's team, and often preferred to sit inside and eat his ham sandwiches in silence. No one outright bullied him. One kid, Sean Harris, 2 years above, had picked on him for a short while we were in Year 4. When Dave finally ratted Sean out to the head after a particularly nasty joke about his dad, we all heard the headmistress shouting from the other end of the building. Honestly, we were all surprised they'd let Sean stay at the school, but whatever, we got the message. After registration, and once the teachers had lectured us about the importance of staying in pairs, we were led to the coach, the same battered old Mercedes that ferried me to school every morning. I greeted the driver with a smile. Following me, Dave mumbled a silent hello, and almost bumped into me when I stopped, frowning. I noticed that my usual seat held Susie Harris, Sean's little sister. Not wanting to make a fuss, though, I looked around for another seat. Dave tapped my shoulder. "What is it?" I asked him. He told me quietly. I need to sit at the front. He didn't meet my eyes. Miss Alvis suddenly interrupted, telling me that Dave gets travel sick. For a second I saw a flash of emotion, even anger, cross Dave's face, and I understood. He didn't want to be coddled. He wanted to go out and play in the field and get muddy and slide tackle and get into fights about whether he'd fouled or not. He wanted to be a kid. But then it was gone. Dave withdrew into his shell, and his grey eyes returned to their neutral silence as he sat down where Miss Aldis had indicated. I sat down next to him, and then we were on our way. It was a short ride into Milton Keynes, 45 minutes, an hour at most. In that time I saw him flinch maybe 7 or 8 times at the sounds of a car braking, or the particularly close approach of a vehicle to the coach. Again I had another moment of clarity, realising the impact, but poorly equipped to deal with it. I tried to ignore the emotions. I asked him what he had in his sandwiches, trying to break the silence. He replied with just ham, not looking away from the window. In the reflection I saw his usual blank, withdrawn face. I replied simply with, huh. When we got off the coach, it was a 5-minute walk to Danger Square, through wide empty roads and past neatly kept, strangely silent shops. Although the laughter and chatter of our group filled the air, and I tried to start conversations with a couple of my friends who were walking alongside us, there was still an overwhelming sense of hush around me and Dave. It was as if, by association, I was becoming part of this quiet that surrounded him, the silence of an outsider. From the outside, there was little to distinguish the building Danger Square was housed in from any of the other identical multi-purpose buildings in the business district. There was plastic sheeting on the windows to keep the light out, and a big white sign with a goofy personified ambulance mascot where other companies had sleek grey corporate signs, but that was it. From the inside though, man, that place was weird. Did either of you ever go in there? No? Well, basically, they taught lessons about safety in towns, standard, don't walk down alleyways, don't get lifts from strangers stuff. The way they imparted these lessons, though, were with this life-size diorama of basically a small town of Danger Square, I guess. After a brief introductory talk from our teachers, the guide, a preppy 19-year-old called Chris, started leading us around the place. We walked down a couple of streets between white-fronted fake houses like flats from a film studio, before arriving at the town's petrol station, where we were told to put our hands up and point out dangers present. I still remember how much the place stank convincingly of petrol. I raised my hand, but Ken Costo pointed out the danger I'd seen. Petrol stored in used 2-litre Coke bottles. Someone else pointed out the mannequin who was on their phone and the petrol spill on the forecourt. After a little prompting, the final issue was revealed, and we moved on. We were next taken to the side of a supposed frozen pond that was actually a disc of blue plastic with a hole cut in the middle, where a child mannequin was scrambling for purchase on the ice. We were briefly taught about what we were and weren't meant to do in this sort of situation, before being moved on. David seemed to want to linger and look at the boy in the pond a little longer, but I was growing frustrated with him and physically grabbed his arm to pull him on. He mutely obeyed. The next place was a house, 3-dimensional, unlike the ones we'd already walked past. There was a foam mannequin trapped and leaning out of the first floor window. His clothes were slightly tattered and his yellow plastic skin almost seemed to sag off his frame. I guess this melting look was sort of appropriate because when the lights turned on and the fake flames popped up, it was apparent that this place was meant to represent a house on fire. Chris explained that everyone would go off in their pairs to a phone box where we were meant to place a 999 call and tell them about the fire. We'd all be videoed and recorded, and when we were done, we'd all watch them. After a few people had their go, Dave and I walked up and into the spotlit red box. Pushing past Dave, who had stopped rather in the way, I punched the 3 digits into the phone. Listening to the taped voice on the receiver, I carefully recited the address of the house and the nature of the emergency. I remember looking out of the corner of my eyes at Dave and feeling scorn for how he was just standing there, looking at one corner of the box, doing nothing. We returned to the others, and after watching a tape of a couple of guys who were joking around in a boisterous manner, the class and I watched Dave and I. Only then did I realise what a dick I was being. From the angle of the camera, I could see that Dave had stopped to dial the number and had started to hand the phone to me before I shoved him out of the way. Once I was on the receiver, he stood there and looked straight up into the camera with that same neutral expression he always wore. Chris then taught us about the recovery position. You know that thing where you lay an unconscious person in that special way and it's meant to keep them from dying? We were shown a video tutorial, complete with late 90s PSA graphic design, before being told to take turns positioning our partners. I was always a fidgety kid and had a hard time letting Dave move me about. When it was my turn, though, he seemed as easily manipulated as an artist's wooden doll. He was just so passive. Chris was walking around judging our attempts at replicating the video, before being interrupted by an accident. Connor Bassett's partner slipped and kneed him in the face, causing Connor, who was already accident-prone, to get a huge nosebleed. Fussing over him, Miss Aldis scolded his partner and hurried Connor out of the room to clean him up, bidding the guide to lead us on without her supervision. While she and a bawling Connor left the group, Chris took the rest of us to what was meant to be a dark alleyway. In reality, it was just a particularly tight spot between 2 rows of fake shops, where the lights had been switched off, but given that the building lacked windows, it was pretty effective. I remember seeing a brief look of confusion pass over Chris's face when he looked over to the back. There was a mannequin back there, wearing a cartoonishly obvious outfit. It was blandly suspicious, complete with a brown trench coat and a low-set hat which all but hid his features. All that I could see was the dim glow of what might have been LEDs in his eyes, glistening slightly in the darkness of his face. After rushing us through a hurried explanation of how we shouldn't take shortcuts we weren't used to, and avoiding being out after dark alone, he moved us to the next diorama, and my heart sunk. It was a car crash scene. A red, crumbled car was positioned, having struck head-on with a truck. While the occupant of the truck was sitting outside, foam head in plastic hands, bright red fake blood on his brow, the only sign of the car's driver was a single slack arm poking out of the shattered windscreen. To be fair to Dave, he tried hard to sit through it and concentrate on what the guide was saying. It was standard lecturing about car safety and how to respond to a situation like this, but I watched Dave's eyes. They were fast approaching tears and kept lingering on the hidden person within the wreck. Finally, he whispered that he needed to go and walked off fast towards the last place we were at. Wanting to give an excuse and not embarrass him in front of everyone, I blurted out to Chris that he really needed the toilet. Half the class seemed to roll their eyes and a couple of people even snickered, but I suppose it was better than them knowing the truth. At least, I thought it was. Our teacher returned with a slightly grumpy Connor in tow, and we moved on without waiting for Dave. When a quarter of an hour passed and he hadn't come back, Chris asked with a half smile where he was. When Miss Aldis realised who we were talking about, though, she didn't smile. She turned to me and asked if I'd let Dave go off on his own. I told her yes, not like I could have followed him into the toilets. She was just telling me that I should have waited outside when Chris came up and asked me what was wrong. I saw Miss Aldis's eyes widen as Chris told her where we'd lost Dave. She quickly told him to alert the manager and start searching the building. Within minutes, the manager, a balding, portly man, was with us. He told the teacher to stay and control us while he had everyone search the building. As he walked off to join them, I blurted out and told him to wait. He asked me what was wrong. I told him that I was sorry and that I'd lied. Dave hadn't gone to the toilet. I'd seen him walking off towards the alleyway, the one with the man in the trench coat. Chris's eyes widened in realisation, but the manager looked confused and asked me, "What man in a trench coat?" I didn't know what to tell him, as perplexed as I was, not realising yet the significance of everyone's responses. I told him, "The mannequin in the alley, with the hat." Miss Aldis let out a sob, but the manager crouched to look at me and said, "Kid, there are no mannequins in the alley."